All right, class is in session. Today we're doing a kind of exam review on a really fascinating topic, the intersection of ancient scripture and modern science. We're going to use our source material as a study guide to see how these two worlds, which can seem miles apart, are sometimes seen as being incredibly connected. So let's dive right in.
So right off the bat, here's the big essay question. Can a text from over 1,400 years ago really align with the scientific discoveries we're making today? It's a huge question, for sure, and the source material we're looking at makes a really compelling case that, yeah, it can, and it all starts with the book itself.
And this verse right here, this is basically the core idea. Our source presents this as a direct encouragement, almost a command, to go out and study the natural world. Look at the universe, look at your own body, and you'll find signs. So in this view, it's not about science versus faith. It's more like science is a path to faith.
And get this, it's not just some throwaway line. According to the source, the Quran has around 750 verses that deal with natural phenomena. 750. That's a whole lot of text, dedicated to the very same things that science is trying to figure out.
Okay, so to make this easy to follow, we're going to treat this just like a study guide. We'll break down the source's main points into 3 distinct units. We're going to start at the biggest scale you can imagine, and then we'll zoom all the way in to the most personal. So, first up, the cosmos.
All right, Unit 1, we're looking up at the stars, at the fabric of space and time, the whole shebang. This is where our source material starts drawing some really striking parallels between verses in the Quran and some of the key discoveries in cosmology from the 20th century.
First point of comparison, the origin of the universe. The source points us to a verse describing the heavens and the earth as once being a single, joined entity before being separated. Now, what does that sound like? Well, it's being compared directly to the Big Bang Theory, which says our entire universe exploded out from a single tiny point. The similarity is that idea of separation from a unified beginning.
Building on that idea, the source highlights another verse. This one talks about building the heaven with strength and, here's the key part, we are its expanders. The scientific parallel here is, of course, Edwin Hubble's game-changing discovery in 1929 that the universe isn't static, it's constantly expanding.
And we've got to remember, this was a massive discovery. I mean, our source quotes the legendary physicist Stephen Hawking, who called it one of the great intellectual revolutions of his time. It completely changed how we see everything. So, the source argues it's pretty significant to find this concept mentioned in a text that's centuries old.
Okay, so if the scripture mentions a beginning and an expansion, what about an end? The source points to a verse that uses this incredible metaphor of folding the heaven like the folding of a written sheet. This is compared to the Big Crunch theory, a scientific possibility where gravity could eventually reverse the expansion and cause the entire universe to collapse back in on itself, kind of like closing a book.
From the unbelievable vastness of space, let's bring it all the way back home. For Unit 2, our focus is planet Earth. Now we're going to look at what the source says about things like geology and oceanography. So check this out. The first point is a question from the Quran, and the mountains as stakes? Now our source compares this to modern geophysics. See, we know now that mountains aren't just big piles of rock on the surface. They have deep roots that go way down into the Earth's crust, helping to stabilize it. A lot like stakes you drive into the ground to hold up a tent.
Next up, let's talk about iron. There's a verse that uses this really specific phrasing, we sent down iron. The source highlights this because, as it turns out, iron isn't actually native to Earth. The science says that all the iron on our planet got here from space billions of years ago, literally sent down in the form of meteorites crashing into the young Earth.
Now, let's move to the oceans. Our source points to a verse describing 2 seas that meet, but have a barrier between them so they don't mix. You might have actually seen videos of this. It's a real oceanographic phenomenon. Where bodies of water with different densities or salinities meet, you can often see a visible line where the 2 waters resist mixing with each other.
And the last point for this unit is about the sky, which a verse describes as a protected ceiling. The source connects this directly to what our atmosphere does. I mean, think about it. It acts as a shield. It filters out harmful radiation from the sun. It burns up most meteors, and it regulates our planet's temperature. It's doing exactly what a protective ceiling would do. So we've covered the cosmos and we've covered the Earth. For our final unit, we're zooming way in to the most intricate scale there is, the human body. Let's look at the parallels our source draws between scripture and modern biology.
Okay, this next part is pretty detailed. The Quran describes embryonic development in these very specific stages. It starts from a drop, then becomes an alaka, which is a fascinating word that means both a leech and a clinging clot. The source notes how the early embryo both clings to the uterine wall and, well, looks a bit like a leech. After that, it becomes a mudga, which translates to a chewed substance. This is compared to the somite stage of development, where the embryo actually looks like it has teeth marks in it.
So here are those stages again, just laid out simply. First, the drop. Then, the leech-like clinging form. And finally, the form that looks like a chewed substance. The argument from the source is pretty direct. How could anyone have known this visual progression without modern microscopes? You just couldn't see this with the naked eye.
And this isn't just a fringe idea. Our source brings in a heavy hitter here, Professor Keith L. Moore, a world-renowned embryologist. After he studied these descriptions, he came to a pretty powerful conclusion. He said that because this knowledge was so accurate and wasn't discovered until centuries later, it must have come from a divine source.
Okay, next up, pain. The source points to a verse that describes a punishment, and it's very specific. It says, when skins are burned away, new ones will be replaced so that the pain can continue. The crucial scientific connection is that link between skin and pain. We now know that the vast majority of our pain receptors are located in the skin. Without skin, you can't feel that kind of pain. It's a biological fact that wasn't really understood until much more recently.
And for our final example in this unit, there's a verse that talks about being seized by a lying, sinful forehead. Now, why the forehead specifically? Well, our source connects this to modern neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain right behind our forehead, is responsible for planning, motivation, and, this is the key part, for telling lies. Brain scans show this is the area that lights up when someone is being deceptive.
Wow, okay, so we have journeyed from the edge of the universe all the way down to the front of our own brains. Let's do a quick final review of what we've covered, and then we'll wrap this up with one last question.
So to recap our review session, Unit 1 was the cosmos, where we looked at the universe's origin, its expansion, and its potential end. Then in Unit 2, we came down to planet Earth, covering mountains, iron, the seas, and the sky. And finally, we just finished Unit 3 on the human body, focusing on embryology, pain, and the frontal lobe of the brain.
And it's really important to remember, the source material presents all of these points as just a sample platter. The argument is that these aren't the only examples out there, and that as our scientific knowledge continues to grow, more of these kinds of connections might become clear.
And so we end with a final, open-ended question that comes from the Quran itself. After presenting all these observations about the universe, the earth, and the human body, the text just asks its reader to reflect on it all. And with that, our explainer is done. Thanks for joining the study session.